Здравствуйте, мои дорогие любители хорошего кинематографа, качественной еды и элитного алкоголя. Меня зовут old.silentium.vulpes и добро пожаловать на мой канал. Смотрите видео, оставляйте комментарии и подписывайтесь на сам канал для поддержки меня. Также вы можете поддержать меня финансово через Donation Alex, DonatPay и платной подпиской на Boosty. Для уведомлений о прямых трансляциях и прочих активностей обязательно подпишитесь на телеграм-канал. Все ссылочки есть в описании. Спасибо и приятного просмотра.
Мартин Скорсезе breakdown his most iconic films. Смотрим, комментарии Мартина Скорсезе по поводу своих самых важных фильмов.
Taxi driver.
Then who the hell else are you talking? Talking to me?
It really goes back to Brian De Palma.
Так, сейчас минуту внесем все. Плюс 23. Внесено, 900 рублей осталось. Спасибо большое, Анатолий. Так.
Independent cinema in Hollywood started saying, hey, maybe these indie films these kids could work in the industry. And so we were all out in LA, and he introduced me to Paul Schrader. Schrader wrote Taxi Driver. Travis comes from his vision, but more psyche. I connected with it through Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. It was like enlightening, you know? And so for me, when I read the script, Brian gave it to me. He said, you know, I don't want to do it.
Конечно, Достоевский один из самых влиятельных русских авторов, наверное, с точки зрения влияния на культуру других стран. То есть, наверняка, все вот эти режиссеры, да даже Кубрик какой-нибудь увлекали Достоевским.
I can't do it, but maybe you should do it. But I didn't have enough cachet, as they say, at that time to make the picture. But then they saw the rough cut of Mean Streets, and they changed their mind, especially when they saw De Niro in it. And so they said, for the two of you, we could probably get this film made.
Why won't you talk to me? Why don't you answer my calls when I call? You think I don't know you're here?
We kept thinking in terms of the character and his loneliness and his acting out. Not condoning the acting out, but he does act out. And yet an empathy with him, which is really tricky.
Ну, в принципе, Скорсезе такой еще бодренький, и бодренько разговаривает.
We wanted to make it so badly.
Сколько ему лет-то? Сколько вообще Скорсезе сейчас? Даже любопытно стало. Да все, итальянская кровь, 81 год дедушки.
Nobody would make it. That we were thinking of going to different cities to make it, San Francisco, Los Angeles, but the tax.
Ну, Достоевский это говно для быдла, другое дело Лесков и Тургенев. Ну, наверное, просто Достоевский более-менее понятен. Здесь вопрос в какой-то трансцендентности. Поэтому Чехов и Достоевский.
Driving wasn't the same. And we said, no, it has to be Manhattan. Ultimately, what stayed with us was the psychological and emotional state of that character. As we know now, tragically, it's a norm. Every other person is like Travis Bickle now. For me, the visualization of the movie was to always try to keep you off balance, keep the audience off balance. I felt that when he made that phone call, it was so painful. We shouldn't witness it. So the camera should track away, but not pan away. It should move completely to a hallway. And in the hallway, you think somebody's coming, but nobody's going to come. Nothing's going to happen. We're all alone. But we don't want to experience the depth of his pain at that point. And at the same time, there's a sense of anxiety on...
Но при этом мне «Таксист» все-таки не нравится. Его тяжко смотреть, не знаю почему. Мне вот тяжело он всегда дается. Король комедии, надеюсь, здесь его тоже обсудят. Намного лучше. Намного бодрее смотрится.
Viewer, what's going to happen in the hallway? Well, apparently nothing. That was the first shot I came up by. So that's the style. There's another thing, too, where the taxi pulls up at the beginning of the film into the taxi garage. Taxi is coming in, we're panning with it as it comes in. And normally it goes this way, and the camera would pan with it, and it stops. Well, as it came in, I went the other way. And as we rested, the car came in and stopped. Wait, I'm supposed to be looking at the car. No, we're going to go another way. And so every shot, as much as possible, was designed to be slightly disconcerting, but ultimately satisfying. That was the philosophy of the shooting.
Это интересно.
Gangs of New York.
Us natives,
Пересмотреть.
born rightwise to this fine land, or the foreign hordes defiling it.
Well, Gangs of New York comes out of those
Или не надо.
cobblestone streets around that church on Mott Street and Mulberry Street. And also coming off the other element that I grew up with really was the Bowery. At that time, the Bowery was what you call now homeless. At that time, really basically alcoholics, guys dying in the streets, basically. Very, very difficult place to grow up around and in. And so, but there was something about that Bowery and something about the neighborhood and the way the buildings were created and the cellars, there's so many cellars. And my father would talk about growing up there and going into one building, going down the cellar and coming out 2 blocks away, running away from the cops, some of the guys, you know. It had its own...
Меня громче? Удивительно. Там, типа, реально такая система подвалов, там, как будто бы там евреи живут или что-то в этом роде. То есть... Ты смотришь, они же гигантские просто.
Life. It was like an organism. And it had a history.
Well, then we got business. What do we do?
With Leo DiCaprio, it was interesting because De Niro, we were acquainted with each other when we were 16 years old. So because of my relationship with him going back to when we were 16, he experienced what I experienced growing up. So he's the only one I know who's around that and who was working in that capacity that knows who I am, where I came from, and the world we were in. He then called me and said at one point, he just made a film called This Boy's Life, and he was working with this kid that he cast, named Leo DiCaprio. He said, he's very good, you got to work with him
Просто мой пиздюк.
someday. And Bob never really used to tell me that, work with somebody, you know, just we'd go from picture to picture if we worked together. And DiCaprio liked our pictures, came together, and they said, why don't we, you've always wanted to do Gangs in New York. We started it many times. It got canceled. Here's a chance. This kid, Leo DiCaprio, really likes your films. At least meet with him. And he was willing to go whatever I could do to make that film. So that's how it all started, with him coming off of Titanic and a couple of other films. Then we convinced Daniel Day to get into it as Bill the Butcher. And Daniel Day is a very intense and very specific actor. And what I love about working with him is that Daniel has a thing where if he starts, he stays in that character. People think it's kind of a mystique, but it really makes sense. And also, because if I'm...
Думки, здравствуйте. Каково ваше отношение к певцу пророку Санбою? Ну, он немного вторичен, но в целом я нормально к нему отношусь. Человек с интересной судьбой.
Talking to Bill the Butcher, and in between takes, it's Daniel. I'm still talking to Bill. He stays in that character, and he'll be one of the other actors.
Немного страшно, когда актер не выходит из роли.
Actor's Irish, and he's not supposed to like the Irish, and, you know, he treats that person that way.
I don't give a tuppeny fuck about your moral conundrum, you meat-headed shitsack.
And they said, why is he? I said, that's what that is. Just, we're not playing. I mean, we're playing, but we're living it. And so he's very good that way. DiCaprio is another way entirely. And he comes at a character from every possible angle. And we find that with Leo, most of the work is done before we shoot.
Лесков вообще, по мне, самый выдающийся писатель, которого носила русская земля. Чего более смешного, жизнеутверждающего и ясного я не читал. Я не читал ничего у Лескова.
Goodfellas.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Goodfellas was made 18 years after Mean Streets.
Нет, я не смотрел фильм «Что гложет Гилберта Грейпа». Вообще просто что такое название.
So I didn't really want to go to do another genre, gangster genre, right? I mean, there is no main character. I mean, Ray Liotta is a wonderful actor, but he's like Virgil taking Dante through the underworld. The real character in the movie is the underworld. After doing the film Last Temptation of Christ, when I got back, I owed Warner Brothers Goodfellas, or became Goodfellas. It was called Wise Guys at the time.
Это тоже прием брать какую-то такую не самую стичкую вещь, пытаться ее как-то эстетизировать. Данте, Вирджил.
I almost didn't want to make it. It was Michael Powell, the director of The Red Shoes, co-director, I should say, and other masterpieces who read the script and insisted I make it. Every shot may feel like a documentary, but the camera moves, everything you see, it's all Clearly, it's all there in the script. We had to stage bits of action. Joe Reedy did, and Michael Ballhaus, my cameraman. They worked out all the background action for the long
Да, кстати, вот эти вот там проходки, они просто офигенные.
Cabana shot. All I said was, we start out in the front, he gives the guy the money. Next thing you know, we go through the thing, we go through here, we go through here, we go through here. We wind up on the famous comic Henny Youngman. Everything has to flow with no obstruction. He's got to impress her. They send him bottles of champagne. Everybody knows him. That's his height. So that shot had to be. And I wanted Joe Pesci to be in the film. And I think he resisted it. I know he resisted it. He said, I don't know, gangster stuff. And I said, yeah, but Joe, I said, this character's really interesting. Based on a real guy.
Really funny. Really funny. What do you mean I'm funny?
And he said, well, if you do it, I got to tell you something. And I said, well, what is it? He goes, not here. And he acted out this scene that happened to him. I knew exactly where to put it. We went through the scene.
Эрен Джейн, здравствуйте. К японским виски я пробовал, в целом интересно. Ну, не сказать, что я как-то был поражен и влюблен в них, когда я пробовал.
Over and over again, recorded it all, each take, and then I created it from the actors' improvisations and tried to make sure that it accelerated the right way, because the slightest change, you know, of like, why am I funny? What do you mean I'm funny? I'm not funny. Otherwise, it would be just repetitious.
Ну, вот, лишь бы к чему-то зацепиться, и начинается вот это.
Funny, like I'm a clown, I amuse you. I make you laugh. I'm here to fucking amuse you. What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
And I decided we'd just do it with two cameras. We squeeze it in on a day that wasn't scheduled. The two cameras would be medium wide shots, because it was important to see, not just, there are no close-ups. It was important to see Joe's character and Ray's character in relation to the people around them. And while the intensity builds, you see the body language of everybody around them change. And it just...
Всем немного неудобно становится. Это всегда так, когда кто-то ссорится.
And I said, well, that's even better. You know, so close-ups, no, let's get out of here. You know, and we shot it like in an hour and a half. Improvised, too, with the bottle breaking on Tony Darrow's head and that sort of thing. He had the nerve to ask to pay the bill. The Departed.
Those guys you tuned up, they're connected down Providence.
Недавно купил себе одну бутылку, зацепила надпись «Вытяжки в бочках сакуры». Надеюсь, не зря. Ну, я думаю, удовольствие какое-то вы все равно получите.
What they're gonna do?
Чтобы в бочках сакуры что выдерживалось, по-моему, я такое не пробовал. Даже интересно. Меня тоже, наверное, зацепило. Вишневые бочечки.
Is come back with some guys and kill you.
I always wanted to work with Jack Nicholson, be in a film, and I offered him the part, and then he said, you know, give me something to play. And he was right, because the way the script was, a Bill Monahan script, which is a very good script, but the character of Costello was still presented as your generic big shot gangster. He hears this young kid in town who just beat up somebody in a bar. He calls him in, checks him out, and then he says, come and talk to me, because he looks at him and says, maybe I can use this kid. We've seen that scene many times in Westerns, in gangster films, because it's very truthful. That's what happens. You could do it in business, too. Suddenly you make a big hit with something and everybody calls you, and they want to see what you can do for them. In this case, it's the underworld. And there was a scene where he's eating a lobster lunch, it said, in his apartment, and he has this kid come in. The basic line was, what can you do for me? What, you want to work with me? You're a tough guy. What can you do for me? I'd seen that scene many times. And Nicholson said, what if...
Лобстер с утра.
Call me and said, what if, while we're at lunch, on the table, in a little plastic bag, is a severed human hand? I said, now that's a job interview. And you never mention it. Don't even discuss it. We went off on a whirlwind of the fact that Costello would be losing control and, in a sense, losing his mind, really. That's something that was...
По-моему, в принципе, роль Джека Николсона — это постоянная losing control. Выдержка в ношенных трусах — топ, советую. Здравствуйте. Папана Риони in Patria.
Very controversial at the time. Some people went with it, some didn't. But the thing was that I was around a situation like that when I was growing up, where somebody very powerful, who was eventually killed in 1968, was, in effect, losing his mind and killing people. An atmosphere of fear that I saw around that area that was what I wanted to capture in Departed. Worse than that, these guys were all informers on each other. And it's true. in a world where everyone is informing on each other now. Complain about the guys, oh, he's out of his mind, he's overdoing.
Там, кстати, вот это, в принципе, с напряжением и саспенс хорошо нагнетается, насколько я сейчас вспоминаю. Я давно его смотрел, наверное, еще когда никогда не жил в Москве, я последний раз его пересматривал. Но там есть такое нагнетание и переживание за персонажей и ситуацию.
No, that's in effect what it would be like. You're completely under his control, and he's out of his mind. And that's what I feel the world is like right now. Raging Bull.
Hit me with everything you got. I want you to fucking lay me out. Go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right.
Harder.
The 70s studio system changed a great deal, and the week that film was released was the same week from the same studio that Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate opened. That, Raging Bull, Apocalypse Now, all from the same studio, United Artists. That ended what the 70s, they call this, golden age, etc. But really, it ended the power of the director, in a way.
Кино переходит от продюсерского к режиссерскому. Режиссерам дали больше власти. Это связано с некоторым кризисом в целом в кинематографии, потому что там не так много денег стало, и, собственно, куча хороших фильмов из-за этого было снято. Но потом сняли хорошие фильмы, которые принесли хорошие деньги, и продюсеры снова вернулись на коня, оседлав режиссеров.
American filmmaking. And that had to come back through independent cinema, another way, through the 80s. The 70s was very much that way because things were wide open. And we went in and we took it, like the barbarians at the gate. And we transformed whatever we could, but they caught us. Raging Bull was we threw everything we knew into it, not knowing how it was going to be received. We understood that people didn't like him, and even the crew, it turned out. I didn't know till later. Why are we making a film about this guy? He's a horror. But we stayed with it. This man may be this way, but still is a human being. He's got a heart. He's got a soul. By the end of it, he finds some kind of peace with himself and maybe the others around him. And I think I was going there to try to find peace in myself. That year, there were, I think, 4 more films coming out about boxing. The Main Event with Barbara Streisand, Prize Fighter with Tim Conway, Matilda, the Boxing Kangaroo, and Rocky II also. And they were all in color. That's when I realized that we should go black and white. And also the black and white would work at this...
Не знаю, почему так тема бокса привлекает режиссеров, и почему все люди любят бокс. Там какие-то кулачные бои, бокс присутствует у Кубрика, Герман старший тоже сам по себе боксировал.
Distinctively different from the other boxing films that were being made, comedies and Rocky II. And also Irwin Winkler pointed out to the studio that the films that were made in black and white up to that point in the 70s were Paper Moon and Lenny, and they were hits. I also thought, too, that the boxing scenes had to be very powerful. The rest of the film, anything else, was concentrated in an almost meditative state in terms of framing, holding those people in that frame. But the boxing scenes would be like you're on another planet. Primarily, it was based on, I came up with the idea when I was doing Last Waltz, being on the stage with the band, and watching how the band worked. The ballet sequences from Red Shoes, where you don't really necessarily...
Опачки, отвращение, как из «Лебедя».
Go head to toe, where you see the dancer. Instead, you see what's inside the mind of the dancer. What's in the mind and what's the perception of the fighter in the ring. They don't even know where they are sometimes. The Wolf of Wall Street.
They're gonna need to send in the national
Субъективная камера.
fucking SWAT team, because I ain't going nowhere!
Again, like Raging Bull, I didn't want to make it, but I had to find my own way in it. And a lot of it had to do with style. The style I felt originally was more like Goodfellas. I had done it. And I did it again in Casino. What more could I bring to it? And we found a way, and that was ultimately through his character. And the whole idea of untethered.
Интересно, там действительно есть какой-то вот этот момент отмытия денег. Там же был скандал с этим, с Волком с Уолл-стрит по поводу отмывания денег. И, может быть, не только он, у Скорсезе с этим связано. Вообще, у Скорсезе достаточно много фильмов. Я тут пересмотрел Ван Хельсинга и понял, что без него не было бы Бладборна. Мне кажется, в большем степени на Бладборн повлиял фильм «Братство Волка». Там костюм буквально такой же у персонажей, как в Бладборне.
Spirit of it. Anything goes, because you're making money. Doesn't matter. It's a little bit that way too in Casino, but Casino has organized...
Ну, мне, в принципе, Ван Хельсинг нравился в свое время, там, про вампиров, с какими-то арбалетами и прочим. Я помню, на в кино ходил, но это было давно.
Crime, it's a different thing. This is organized another way. And so with that understanding, then I was able to play with the structure of it and make it right away. First 3 or 4 minutes of the film, you could see right away this is going to be something unexpected. Like every other shot, there's something shocking going on in a way, or supposedly shocking. In order to do that, you have to have somebody who's playing that part be prepared to do anything. And he did.
Там еще повлияло очень сильно какое-то аниме про вампиров. Забыл, как оно называется. Мы, по-моему, даже его смотрели, какую-то часть из него по визуальному плану. Я про Bloodborne.
I would provoke him, he'd provoke me, we'd go further. If you read the book, we could have gone even further. Mean Streets.
Hey, what's the matter with this kid, huh? Hey, there ain't nothing wrong with me, my friend. I'm feeling fine. Keep your mouth shut. Hey, you told me that in front of this asshole.
I was living in the late 50s into the early 60s down in my old neighborhood of what they used to call Little Italy. At that time, it really was Little Italy. Families were loving, but, you know, it was the tenements, and it was not a really good place. And they were good people, but at the same time, it was steeped in a kind of organized crime. Mean Streets comes out of that violence, which I missed by chance, really.
Now's the time.
I was with these people in this car. I told my friend was with me, and we're in the back seat, and I said, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. This is nonsense. Let's go home. He said, yeah, okay, let's go home. The car drove off, and they got shot. It had to do with a lot of street power, so to speak, a sense of certain rules that the underworld works with. And a lot of it had to do with
Либо чуешь это, либо нет.
My brother's keeper. It also reflects my father and his youngest brother. My father was one of 8 children. His youngest brother was always in jail, always in trouble. And my father was always trying to broker situations where he wouldn't get killed.
He has about $30. That's all he's got on him, Michael.
По-моему, это, кстати, один из любимых фильмов Триера, и мы его посмотрели как-то на стриме.
Where's the rest?
Не скажу, что он мне сильно...
Where's the rest?
The extent to which one is your real brother or one is such a close friend that you put yourself on the line is something that's really important to me in terms of how you live a life and try to live a good moral life, but you're in a world that is completely corrupt.
You don't make up for your sins in the church. You do it in the streets. You do it at home.
And that's the essence of Mean Streets. That's what I talk about in the beginning. You know, you can go to church all you want, but the real acting out of your morality is outside the church. It's outside the building of the church. It's in the home. It's with your friends, and that. All the rest is an illusion. I was 5 years old in New York. It was the late 40s. We had a television, 16-inch. On Friday nights, there was an Italian film shown for the Italian-American community. And my grandparents would come over, and they didn't speak English, only Sicilian. And my mother and father, my uncles, and we'd get around this little TV set, and we...
Блин, прикиньте, жить в стране, даже не знать языка. Вообще жесть.
You see the bicycle thief. It had these words in the...
Классика неореализма.
Bottom. The people that were speaking in the film, they were speaking the same way as my family. Those Italian films were more than cinema. They were a form of truth that I related to because it somehow had something to do with who I am. And so no matter what I shoot, it isn't directly saying, oh, we're going to do a shot now from The Bicycle Thief. No, it's the emotional and psychological impact of experiencing that film when I was 5 or 6 in the room with these people who lived it. The Irishman.
I don't know. It sounds funny. It stops, it starts, it loses power.
See if I can give you a hand.
Over the years, seeing the difference in the technology, one of the key things to give us the energy to make our first films, features, was John Cassavetes doing Shadows in 16 millimeter, which came from France with the Eclair camera. So all of that happening at that time made it that we could make a film ourselves. We didn't have to have the studio behind us with giant lights and giant Mitchell BNCs. I've kind of stayed pretty much traditional. We edit now with the computer, but I don't really know how to do that. Thelma does it. If I can utilize the new technology.
Дедушка не умеет с компьютером работать.
for the kind of story I want to make, why not go there? And so in the case of Irishman, De Niro and I had this idea for a long time. And I didn't want to do another gangster genre. Part of the problem was
типичный гангстерский жанр.
Flashbacks. And by the time we got to do it, he was too old to play his younger self. And they said, well, a different actor. And I said, well, then it's not like us making a film together. What's the point? And so we were talking about this idea of youthification. And Pablo Herman of ILM was with us doing CGI or background material for us.
Скажем, где-то это у них хорошо получилось, но где-то неубедительно, просто из-за того, что там старик не может избивать нормально так со всей силы. Там есть странные кадры избиения, когда он так Де Ниро непосредственно.
Well, we're doing silence. And he came up and he said, I think I can do it. What I have seen is that people have to wear golf balls on their faces. You can't have a scene with Joe Pesci and Bob De Niro and Al Pacino or whatever, and they all have golf balls on their faces, and they're the kinds of actors that kind of thing, for this kind of movie, it doesn't work. And eventually, by the end of the shoot of Silence, he had it. And we did a test with Bob, and we're De Niro, and we tried it, and we all felt strongly about it. The drawback was financially, because it was extremely expensive, and also length of time.
Вот этот момент. Не знаю, почему они его не исправили. То есть это можно было даже поправить на каком-нибудь, потом в досъемках, когда вы увидели, что такая лажа получилась. Или как-то это разбавить, может быть, монтажом.
It was an extra 5 to 6 months.
Это в Телеграме скинули гифку с этим моментом.
In the post-production. That's when Netflix came in and really helped us. It's not just CGI. We accept it if a person puts on a fat suit or you paint their hair white, they're supposed to be old. But what if you do it digitally? It's like makeup. It's just taking that leap of saying, oh, no, it's got to be the old way. This is now a transformation.
Расселини, кстати, участвовал в операции «Гладио», ЦРУ либерализировали Италию через social gospel, весь неореализм, социальная инженерия.
Into a new way.
Это как бы не страшно, на чьи деньги это делалось, тем не менее, фильм-то хороший.
Silence.
Silence я не видел.
Things that happened when I was making Last Temptation that took me only up to a certain point. I found myself wanting more, and I found it in Silence. And when I read the book, I was in Japan, actually.
Вообще вот такие как бы факты, как будто попытка обесценить что-то. Просто типа, если это там где-то в чем-то как-то скооперировано с политиками, с прочим, значит, это не произведение искусства, это, значит, не имеет никакой ценности. Люди любят такие маркеры навешивать, то, чтобы упростить себе реальность. Наверное, это нормально. В этом мы сами.
It was 1989, and I tried to write a version of the script with my friend Jay Cox by 1990, 92, but I didn't get it. And it took me years, another 10, 12 years, to live a life and experience with different exploration, making kundun, for example, the Dalai Lama, all of these things. And finally, by around 2006, 2007, I was able to put the script together. I felt that we could do it. Too many technical business problems. It almost made it impossible to get made, but eventually it did. Ang Lee's group helped us to shoot in Taiwan, a special experience for the entire crew making the film. The locations, the people, the scenes themselves, what the Japanese actors, I mean, it was really a kind of spiritual journey. Killers of the Flower Moon.
Their time is over.
Тоже офигенно. Мне понравился. Мне «Ирландец» на самом деле нравится, несмотря на свою Татьяну. То есть, а вот «Убийцы цветочной луны» я даже видел 2 раза, и оба раза он смотрится нормально, несмотря на свой метраж. Интересно всем этим наблюдать.
6 years. We didn't intend to take it 6 years, but I was making The Irishman, and then there was COVID. I was given the book and read the book, and I was very excited by that. I didn't quite know how to go about it. Eric Roth and I went through a process of a few years of pulling the script together and the story. And there were some wonderful things in it. We got it to a point where we said, let's sit down and read this thing. I got some friends, and we sat down. Leo was there, Eric. It was good, But there was something about it that I felt we've been there before, and that was the idea of a police procedural. And the character that he was supposed to play, Tom White, was a character that is straight-laced, very strong, very proper guy. And so we thought about it for another week and a half, and then Leo came to me and said, where's the real heart of this picture? I said, the heart is with this guy, Ernest, and his wife, Molly. The only problem is we don't know anything about Ernest. Everybody else you've got tons of material on. We don't know anything about him. So we came up with the idea of what if, instead of coming from the outside in, what if we go from the inside out? Then I said, oh yeah, the story really is the relationship of Ernest and Molly and the betrayal. I said, the only problem there is that it's a creative problem, which is you take the script, you turn it inside out. And how much of procedural do you need? Not very much. It started to come together. It gave me the direction that I felt comfortable in. The other way I've seen that kind of movies, I enjoy doing it, imagine doing it.
В целом, так-то ушедший год достаточно богатый на хорошие, впечатляющие фильмы.
Horses and running and...
Еще забытый и всеми почти неупоминаемый Наполеон.
Western tropes, in a way, they call it. I would love that, but I've seen it, and they did it so much better. Everybody else does it better. So here, though, you're in the house, and there's a husband and wife, and this guy is dodgy. He's being manipulated by this sort of angel of death, his uncle.
You got nice color scheme. What color would you say that is?
My color.
We had been working on the casting for quite a while, including indigenous people. She says, I have somebody I want you to see. But then I saw this scene from Certain Women, Kelly Reichardt's film. I thought she was wonderful. And after COVID, we got to meet. I was struck by the whole visage, the face, and her intelligence. One could see that there's a lot going on in her face, but her not doing very much, which is perfect for film acting. Also, the intelligence and level of understanding and of coming from indigenous people and being an activist, we could learn from her, which is what we did. And we all worked together, myself, her, and Leo, very, very closely.
Смотрели. Спасибо большое, Анатолий. Нормально. Хорошо.